Recording in
Rome on Saturday evening. Right, let's have a look at the web forecast a bit earlier than normal. Nice to see you. I'm sure you got you always immaculate. 3 per ball and got you in an hour early.
I'm just going to say hello to everybody who's already here. And it's great to see you. Welcome to the launch of Identity Presents Loose Connections. Now I'm going to pause a bit because we're just trying to give, other people a chance to get in. It's only, 32, it's 6:32. And so, we'll give people a couple more minutes to join us. But a lot of you are already here. So thank you. And there's a siren in the background. Zoom world, isn't it lovely? So yeah, if you'll just hold on just a couple more minutes and we'll wait for everyone else to get here. And about 2 minutes and I'll get started. I've noticed that some people have started saying hi in the chat if you're in the Zoom. So hi, Loose Connections. Hi, Lucy Power. Oh, lovely to see you. Hina Patel, who's part of our staff, has also said hi. So if you want to say hi, so because in the webinar sort of thing, it's hard to see everybody who's here. If you want to put a hi and hi everybody in the chat, then we'll have other people will be able to see you for a little bit. I see Sina saying she's completely new to this. So she says she's really happy to have heard of this today. And we're happy if this is the beginning of your Zoom world. I hope that you enjoy this part of Zoom world. And one of our readers, Rana, is saying hi. Stacy Hall, Afidi, Deanne Heron, Carrie Jade Williams. Oh, coming from Ireland to listen to us. That sound, I feel really blessed. Florence Marfa is saying hi, Abe. Patricia Wallace is saying from sunny East Ireland. We've got an Irish audience. I am so shocked. Well, why should I be shocked? Zoom world is international, isn't it? Oh, Megan. Megan Elevado is saying hello from Brooklyn, New York. I think that she might know Abe. She's come for Abe. So you've got international fan, Angela Chevo, I don't know. And Kirit is saying hi to everyone, one of our readers. Angela Chevo is like, Abe has such a really good fan base here. So thank you, Abe, you really got people in. Abdul Karim coming from Nottingham, great. Rebecca Gelbert from sunny Leeds, another Abe fan, whoa. And Deepika Mummery, who wants to join Identity. And this is her first, so she's getting a great introduction to the group. And Abe is saying thank you to everyone who could make it tonight. I want to echo that. Jen Eve Taylor from London. I'm really enjoying this part. I'm supposed to start being formal, but just seeing all the names is really exciting. Deborah, another Abe fan, Deborah. Amna is, she was invited by her good friend Marcia, and she's from Manchester, but she's in London. So she's representing down south. Alicia Smith, another Abe fan. Hello from Cornwall, southwest of England. Wow, Abe, you really did your work about getting us a big audience. So hello to everyone who's got here on time. And I'll keep doing the shout outs that I see in the chat. If you want to shout out to the chat, I'll try and mention it. But welcome everybody, and welcome officially to the launch of Loose Connections, which is an audio collection that Identity Workshop has put together. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Commonword, who are the people who are hosting all this, and my employers. I'm a co-artistic director of Commonword and Cultureword. Cultureword is a name that Commonword began to use to represent Black writers back in the day, but now we're a completely Black-led organization. So if you're confused about why our website is Cultureword, but our name is Commonword, that's why. And we got founded way back in 1977, and as part of a worker writers movement across the UK. And from the beginning, we wanted to represent voices that might sometimes be excluded from literary circles or whatever you want to call it. So it was white working class writers, Black writers, women writers, LGBTQIA+ writers, and Identity Workshop was started. I joined in 1988, and it was already well established for a few years by the time I joined. There we had the worker from Commonword who facilitated Identity back then. Oh yeah, here we go, pictures from back in the day. So if you look at the left-hand picture, the person furthest to the left, that's Pete Kalu, who's now co-artistic director with me of Commonword, and a writer, and a novelist. Recently had a launch of Shots in the Dark 2, which is sort of Black crime writing. Next to him is a very young Lem Sisse. You may have seen Lem on many TV shows, and he's the chancellor of Manchester University, and really well-known writer. But when I came, he was, you know, like a young worker here at Commonword, and identity was what he started. And he actually, I'm here talking, and I'm still in Commonword because I joined Identity when I came here as a student in 1988 to Manchester University. And I was lucky enough to live in Moss Side. And back then, Identity was meeting in Moss Side back in 1988 when I got here in the Green Hayes Center. And I was less than a 5-minute walk from where I was living. And I got to meet Lem. Lem formed Identity into sort of a collective. That's Patrick that's sitting next to Lem. And then that's Sue Andy, who some of you might know is another fabulous writer and a very early Identity member. And she ran Black Arts Alliance and still does. In the next picture, the guy in the leather hat, that's John Lyons. And again, he's a very, very, very good writer and also a great visual artist who has pieces in national collections like the V&A. That's Tang Lin next to him, who was really fun. You can see she's laughing. I had a load of fun when I was there. And that is a very young me with the chandelier earrings and my hair in an afro and everything. Before I grew, these are like really long dreads. But for me, Identity was crucial because that's how I got my first commissions as a playwright, my first residencies with local theaters as a writer. I got first published as a poet. I was actually in a book with John Lyons and Lem, and we had a little collection called The Sun Rises in the North with fabulous Asian writer, a British Asian writer, Debjani Chatterjee, who I think now is based in Sheffield. And Identity back in those days, we did a lot. We sort of, Lem formed this into like a collective. So we would go out, 10 strong and do readings all over the place. We'd get, we'd hire a little bus, one of those coaches. And then we'd take off and we'd do libraries, around the Northwest and as far down as Sheffield, around Huddersfield, we'd go to Huddersfield, we'd go all over the place. This is Identity magazine. I can remember doing, you can see issue #1 on the right part of the screen. I can remember walking up and down Princess Street in Moss Side and going to all the little sort of, businesses and getting them to take out, ads in our magazine so that we could publish it because we raised the money to do that. And you see, we really like Benjamin Zephaniah because he's on both our covers, but Benjamin was always really, supportive. So the other thing that Identity did a lot was when you had somebody big like Benjamin coming to read, or Linton Kwesi Johnson, I got to support Linton Kwesi Johnson and his band, and I got to do a reading when they came to the Library Theater, which now has become home. But, so that's part of what, sort of how everything started. Okay, it's gone back to just seeing everybody's faces, which is nice. So that gives you a little bit of that, I was a poet, but I didn't become a real poet until I went to Identity. And it was the coming in every week, and reading your stuff with everybody else and people giving only constructive feedback. And then the fact that we did go out and do readings together, that is what turned me into a performer. So I now do like solo shows and go to Edinburgh and Fridge and blah, blah. But all of that started with Identity. That's how I got my start in the theater, my start as a writer, as a professional writer. And ever since then, Identity has been churning out great, great writers. Carlene Smith, I don't know if you know her. She wrote, a long time ago, she wrote a book called Moss Side Massive. We've got Jennifer McCumbee, who just won the Jalak Prize and has won several prizes. She was also, a Commonword writer. I could just, keep slinging names at you. but that would be boring because tonight is really about current identity. I'm sort of identity of the past and have a really strong emotional tie to the group. But I had a great time working with the writers who are in identity now. And I think that their writing is fabulous. I really, really enjoyed working with them a little bit on it to help them perform a little bit. So I think, let me just make sure that I'm not supposed to talk about anything else. No, what's changed is that when we first started, I'm talking about 1988, 89, 90, you know, you're going back a ways now. And there weren't as many sort of professional Black writers in Manchester actually able to make a living. And identity was a lifeline. Commonword was a lifeline. Commonword, like I said, it was through identity that I first got published, but Commonword also published my first collection that then got nominated for the Polari Prize, which is a national prize with my first outing. And that's because of the support that I've got from Commonword over all these years. So what's different is that there are a few more of us spread around the city, but again, that we still need that sense of connection. So I think that hasn't changed. But I'll just hand over to Claire Ramsaram because she's lucky enough to be the facilitator of today's identity.
Okay, thank you. I was having a bit of trouble unmuting, so I had to wait to be allowed to do that. But thank you so much, Cheryl, and thanks for that great history of identity. I didn't know a lot of that, so it's great to hear it. I was going to start with the fact that I joined Identity as a member in 2017, but Cheryl just reminded me, thinking back, that I actually submitted some poems to a Commonword anthology, which I think was a suitcase book of love poems. Quite a while ago, and it wasn't the first thing that I had published, but it was the first time I ever got a contract for publishing something. So, and it was signed by Pete Kalu, I believe. So, and that really felt like something as a writer. You know, when you have something published, and it's like you're giving it to people, and you're lucky to have them publish you, which you always are. But the fact that I got a contract made me feel like more of a writer. And I really appreciate that Commonword was almost the first organisation to show me that level of respect as a writer. We'll give you a contract for your poems. So that was the first sort of publishing, time I was published with Commonword. And then I joined Identity as a member in 2017. I was at the time, and still am, working on a novel which is inspired by my Indo-Caribbean and Irish heritage. So shout out to Ireland and shout out to Guyana if there's anybody listening from there, but I think it's unlikely. I brought some pages from my draft novel to the group for feedback. And eventually in 2018, I started working as a facilitator of identity. So I've been doing that for 2.5 years now. And our group is very different from the group that Cheryl ran. And I think that partly reflects that there's probably less of a spoken word scene now than there was then. So we more focus on, we met in a room in person. If anyone can remember doing anything in a room in person with other people, that's what we were doing. We give each other feedback, help writers to meet their goals. And just personally, and I think a lot of people share this, is I believe passionately it's really vital for us to see all of our different lives reflected back to us in literature. Because often, and I'm sure a lot of people have this experience, it's like you're looking in the mirror and there's nothing in there. You never get to see yourself in that mirror. So I think we're helping to address that, and for British literature to start reflecting the diversity of voices of people that are British and in Britain. So to this end, we started working on an identity collection. So I'll talk a little bit about the process because I think it's kind of interesting in how it came about. So at first we decided we wanted to put out a collection for the group. So inspired by those magazines that Cheryl worked on, with Benjamin Zephaniah on the cover quite a lot, it seemed. That was very inspiring to us when we saw those in the archive that Hina helped worked on. So we thought, well, should we have a theme for people to write about? And then we had a bit of a discussion and ended up that just people submitted pieces that they felt strongly about and wanted to share. So I took on the role of editor, read all the pieces, started seeing themes emerging. And then we met together as a group and it came out really strongly. I mean, not surprisingly maybe, but there were really strong themes of diaspora, immigration, about people who are refugees. There was also another really strong strand of family and family relationships, which, as we all know, are sometimes strong and sometimes difficult. So ours probably lent on the difficult side. And then also another theme was memoir. People were writing various versions of memoirs. So those were our kind of three major areas: diaspora, families, and memoirs. So we were trying to think of a title to reflect these, and we came up with loads of different titles. And finally, I think it was Jay, who's one of the writers who's reading tonight, thought of Loose Connections. And that seemed to work really well because it was, we have loose connections to the countries that our parents come from, or in some cases we come from, or in some cases our grandparents come from. So those connections have been loosened by colonialism and by migration. And also it was about those slightly loose connections between people in families. So it seemed like a really good title. We were just ready to put out a paper booklet, and then COVID came along, lockdown came along, which, as we know, had many tragic impacts on people's lives and health. One impact for us is that we went online, and so did our anthology. So now it's not a paper booklet, but it's a PDF, which I think Radhika is going to show us on our screen soon. You're going to show us that, Radhika? Yeah, okay, brilliant. So, sorry, I didn't really give you a heads up about that. This is the identity webpage. So this is, for anyone who's interested in joining the group, you can get details from this page. And then if you scroll down a little, you can see that there's a Loose Connections launch. There's a playlist, which we're going to come back to. But first of all, we're going to have a look at the PDF. So you can just read the collection as a PDF. It's available on the website. Lovely cover by Charlotte Maxwell. So thank you very much, Charlotte. I hope you're here tonight, but if you're not, thank you anyway. Yeah, and if you just scroll down, you can see the contents page. And so many of the writers you'll see here are reading tonight. And then if you want to click on one, it'll lead you to the appropriate page of the collection. So that's online. And then also we had a playlist. So again, if you go back to the website, then you'll see there's the Loose Connections playlist, and you can, you know, scroll through and see all the different pieces that are on there. So I think it takes about an hour to listen to the whole thing. So very well worth a listen to that. Okay, yeah, so I don't want it to become like the Oscars, but thank you very much to Cheryl for coming to help us coach us to read for the collection. Thank you to Mambube, who helped us more with the technical side of recording, to Charlotte for the great cover, and for Radhika for organising this launch and doing all the sort of background, showing us bits and pieces. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to invite our first reader on to read her piece. I'm going to introduce her. Apologies in advance. I have been trying to practice my Yoruba pronunciation, but I've not got there yet. So our first reader is Abiodun Abe Abdul, and she's a Yoruba Nigerian writer who won several poetry awards throughout childhood. Fascinated by how grammar could be bent to facilitate new meaning and enhance creative expression, She has worked for several years in higher education as an English language lecturer and assessor across the globe. Most of her expressive writing is now creative non-fiction prose and autoethnographical memoir, in particular encompassing her schooling across 3 continents. But she still enjoys composing poetry, focusing as ever on social justice and topics celebrating our common humanity, which have been included in various other anthologies. So over to you, Abe.
Thank you for that introduction, Claire. And good evening, everyone. This is my poem, Identity, Global Roots. You're 1 in a million, a special stat, though 1 in 8 billion, more pivotal than that. Each human perspective, all quite unique, but more vantage lies from airborne peaks. With privileged travel, I was blessed to see, through childhood's eye, continents are free. Upon African, European, and Asian marks, my young life journey did oddly embark. Yoruba Nigerian, surface to core, vibrant clothes and spice galore. Zuma rock with crimson sun-kissed clay governs over Abuja every passing day. From northern desert to southern green, palace of Zaria to great walls of Benin, Sarawiwa's passion roused and stirred, Fela Kuti's music and Chimamanda's words. With fastidious spirits and bookish minds, Nigerians are truly one of a kind. The British Isles, my place of birth, snowy winters, my first glimpse of earth. My northern school, ease did inspire with diversity from across past empire. But street lessons differed from class, with many a racist laddie and lass. To combat the ignorance I truly abhorred, Adayo Sebo and Bellos brought Black history to these shores. Still, why come to this forsaken land? Looped in my mind for hours at hand. Japan, land where I regained the sun. With chopsticks and manga, I did have fun. Kimonos and green tea filled the air. Earthquakes and Godzilla aroused slight fear. I marveled at beautiful narrow eyes. My wide ovals equal praise, quite a surprise. Deathly shy, yet defiantly daring, mixed with Kuroyanagi and Takato's caring. In this friendly Eastern community, again, I embraced humanity. Here I stand in the fateful present, surveying my international development. With learnings both glowing and dull in tone, I advanced along these world stepping stones. Through many twists and varied turns, body, mind, and soul were both nourished and burned. Still, the collective motto was clear to see. Love bonds our global family. Thank you so much for listening to my poem. Now, I'd like to introduce the next speaker, Jay Ahmed, an insightful poet who writes about the things which connect us so as to promote positive change, particularly recognized for his poems which express the hardships of those in society. His work encompasses the solutions we might search for and encourages us to dig deep for our answers. In his words, I feel I have a responsibility to my art. I am humbled by the many opportunities I have to share my work widely, and I feel it is my duty to ensure that my art is not only beautiful, but constructive too. Please welcome Jay Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Abe, for that lovely introduction. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I have two poems in our ebook. One of them is called Imagine and the other one is called Equality. I'm going to read Imagine first, and then I'm going to read another poem. I'll explain that in a minute. Now, Imagine is a poem that I wrote for Refugee Week 2020, and it was published online. And it's one that was very important to me at the time, and still is actually. So I'm going to read it. It's called Imagine, the Art of Change. Imagine all the borders which divide across the globe, dissolving into nothing, so people free to roam could seek a place of refuge when they face a threat, unhindered by bureaucracy, treated with respect. Imagine how life would be for a refugee who comes to face no prejudice, no eyes that cannot see, who comes to seek the sanctuary of a place at rest and finds that place with people who truly do their best. Imagine better journeys for the many refugees who come to find a place with us from trouble that they flee. Once you have that vision, hold it fervently. Keep it in your heart, like art. Create what you can see. Thank you for listening to that poem. Now, thank you. Now, the second poem I've got for you isn't the one that I published in the anthology. It's one I wrote slightly later on, but had I written it earlier, it would have gone in the anthology. So it's called Rise, and I wrote it for Salford NHS CCG event. And it's inspired by Dr. Maya Angelou's original poem, Still I Rise. And here it goes. Rise. You may see a man of color and wonder how I smile in a world of prejudice where people in denial add to the divisions in ignorance that's bliss. Still I rise to unify and change the way it is. You may ask me how I do it, where I find the drive in the face of such adversity, why it is I try. I want to answer, honestly, I just don't have the time. Too busy making changes. So it is, I rise. To all of those who see me through prejudicial eyes, and those who do not see at all beyond society's lies, does my happiness offend you? Of course, you will deny, yet still you are the reason that I proceed to rise. Insult me with your colored views, beat me with your words. My bludgeoned head will never bow, such hate is undeserved. Trample me on equal ground, shove me to the floor. Still I will rise above to rise that little more. For I, the quiet whisper uttered on the boats, rise up now in harmony in these poetic notes. I, the rattle of the shackles that tethered us together, rise as a reminder we're separated never. I, the ravished motherland known as home of past, speaking to my people, saying, rise, my people, fast. I, the washed up refugee on the morning beach, plead, hear my spirit speak. Please wise up and defeat the prejudice and hatred that takes our destinies, replaces them with fates that were never meant to be. Elevate to elevate, rise up side by side. We're birds and butterflies that float. Rise, my people, rise. Thank you for listening. Now then, it's a great honor now to introduce the next poet and writer. I think it's not a poet, a poem he's got, it's something else in fact. But the next writer, Kirit. Kirit lives in Manchester with his better half and husband, Sean. Having worked in the voluntary and community sector for over 25 years as a manager, trustee and trainer, Kirit is now developing his passion for creative writing, and in this anthology, seeing for the first time his short story in digital format. So please, Kirit.
Thank you, Jay, for that introduction. So I'll read you my short piece, which I wrote. This is my first ever reading. So it's an extract from, my first ever published piece of work in any format. So I'm really proud of it, but also quite, I'm also very pleased to be able to read it to yourselves tonight. It's an extract from it, so here it goes. This was not a lie. In the aftermath of rescuing Sultan from his tormentors, a bruised and wounded Reza was gripped by a fever, shaking his orbit to the core. He harbored a secret yearning that consumed him, and Reza could not remember when or why Sultan slowly entered like an unwanted intruder and lit a small fire inside his dreams. Out of reach or by his side, he saw Sultan's beguiling expression, tousled hair and unshaved, concentrating on being a scholar, reciting poets and sacred texts into the night. Reza was not prepared to deny his growing feelings for him. He needed to escape. His desire was not against the laws of nature. It was not against God's plan for him. It was not a crime to love. Reza refused to cast himself as a criminal left dangling from a tightened noose, or a misguided soul thrown into the gaping fiery furnace of awaiting hell. 5 long years disappeared into a strange, empty, and lonely black chasm. He was slowly drowning under a grey urban Manchester skyline, drenched by relentless rains and dampened by a cold, chilly air stinging into his bones. He wandered on unfamiliar, crowded, noisy streets garlanded with neon lights blinding his gaze and foreign tongues chattering in his ears. He begged and jostled his way to fill an aching stomach, cleaning cars, digging gardens and painting fences, or standing guard, fending off flighty thieves in a corner shop. Sweeping the floor of shredded tufts of hair mixed with dust and dirt, Reza found some comfort in a Turkish-run barber's. A year earlier, the owner spied him crouched on a wooden park bench shaded by a blustery pink wave of cherry blossoms. He gave Reza 2 things in his insecure world: a warm bed to lie in, and more importantly, he taught Reza a skill, how to handle a sharpened razor blade and a good pair of steel scissors. He learned to cut and to trim, and to craft stars from discarded fashion magazines. His coarse, blistered hands softened as he rinsed and dried, waxed and oiled. His strong fingers and palms rubbed into the beards and scalps. He massaged the wiry and the rough locks, frayed and tangled, spare bristles and bare patches, smooth fine threads and edges, dark ebony, chestnut brown and milky white. He was reminded of what he had lost in his quietest moments. He felt his mother's breath on his cheek, the taste of tangy oranges, the smell of sweet rose perfume oil in her hair, and scented powdered soap on her skin. He was wrapped in a warm embrace and caressed by her soothing hands. He had buried his beaten, bloodied face into the tainted yellow folds of her dress. His mother implored him to ignore their taunts, their jibes. Yasser and Farouk and the other boys are not like you. They're not your equal. You will follow a different path. And at nights, when Reza was pressed his lips against the pillow, peculiar, unfulfilled longing swept inside his mind like a spiraling tempest, where he was reunited with a half-naked sultan in a swirling, delirious dance in a luscious emerald field. And on the station platform, Sultan was standing and waving outside the train window. He pressed his faded henna painted hand against the glass, wished him well and mouthed 3 words, God keep you. Thank you. And I'm now reading of Rana's piece. So we could, sorry, not reading Rana's piece, apologies, Claire, I don't have the...
do you want, shall I read it?
Yeah, please.
I think you went we went out of order a little bit. Okay, so our 4th reader today is Rana Kadiri, a storyteller at heart. Rana channels her love for writing to raise awareness on everything from intersectional feminism, identity, mental health, race, social justice, and politics to cats. A spoken word poet and aspiring playwright, she channels her experiences as a Kenyan-born Indian British Muslim activist to focus on societal issues that interconnect gender, race, and identity. Okay, take it away then, Rana.
Hi there, great to see so many new faces here and old, for more familiar people too. So my piece is called Peace Is. Peace is famed in history's tales, stories passed down from generation to generation about nations living blissfully side by side, salvaged from darkness and strife, ignorance and a stifled life, stitched with white thread, embellishing oppressor to savior and victim to barbaric, hemming archives full of heroic acts, lands conquered of slaves obtained, unpicking chapters that capture the bloodbath, the carnage, the pillage, the rape, a tapestry of such lengths. Its tragedies are still unfolding. Peace is a fable from ancient times, told from parcel-tongued oppressors, spilling bloodshed as easily as breathing. Of our ancestors who lived undisturbed until so-called white civilization came to lands unknown. A history that has not redeemed itself, of maps shrunk and boundary lines eroded, flipped over until the birthplace is on its knees. Until continents no longer in proportion, Earth's gifts stolen. Peace is a hypnotizing recital, the tune they sing when they want a melody that hums to their own score. A composition of notes and chords harmonized to create nations hypnotized and living in oblivion of the harsh reality of fabricated truths, carrying souls on a symphony not of their own making. This cadence is one that does not resonate, the accents and tempos composed to remove all trace of accountability, conducted by white-gloved hands to a sanitized coda. Peace is a colorful chronicle of victories celebrated at home as whole families lay decimated in foreign dusky streets. It is the hanging tapestry of lies interwoven with blood and thread of hatred and shame spread. It is pride of place above hearth and mantelpiece of many a conqueror. Showcasing culture pinched, dissected, ridiculed, appropriated, this colonial palette made more palatable from snowy chai latte, caramel mocha, mahogany to ebony, while nooses wound tight of a different type of thread, registering another type of hanging. This weaving is more than just intricate stitching, warped truths hiding in plain sight. Peace is simplified sonnets, romanticized by fair poets and privileged authors reared in mansions with parlors for high tea, leaves pinched and plucked from worn, tan gnarly hands and hennaed feet, more than just souls cracked on the surface. From lands once owned by a hierarchy of color, only the highest caliber will pass muster. Shades of beige make light of the origins of Earl Grey, blue blood's measure of aristocracy through inherited silver spoons and status, man-made titles and deeds. While disowned fields with labor told from hands and feet severed from their birthright, weep silently for more than just nature's kinship and ties lost. Peace is a false truce. Treaties made in exchange for land and gold, emerald and cloves never owned by the ones that sold ignorance to the highest bidder. Bought with poached goods, rubies and diamonds, sugar and tea leaves, cotton and silk, directing a theatre of privilege, avarice and disdain, a one-way amnesty, more than just lands taken, innocent men, women and babes stripped to the bone and laid bare, souls trapped in. Peace is a counterfeit memoir authored from one's perspective of a narrative shared the world over with momentary pauses of acknowledgement. Icons temporarily revered and the magnitude of reality ignored, the scars of which cannot fade if the existence of continuing privileged is not erased. Rewind. Return to chapter 1. Generations mourn losses they can't quite recollect, but the soul knows history's truths passed on from womb to womb, unspoken legacies from grandmother to daughter, granddaughter, tragedies stitched deep, unseen into the veins and lifeblood of bodies that have never set foot on the plains where it all began. So remember that peace is a reconstruction. This legacy will never be forgotten because this story is never ending. Thank you. So that's the end of the first half, and we're now going to go to a 5-minute break. So hopefully see you soon.
Thank you, Ronna.
Hello, everyone. Are we back? I can't see anybody. Claire,
yeah.
can you see?
A message just went out that we were starting again at 7:25. So
7:25. Sorry, Claire. Oh, I've got a few more minutes. I'll make it 7:23.
Thank you.
I can only see you, Claire. I can't see anybody else on the. Okay. Should we start, Claire? Wondering. Yeah. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. And yeah, it's been a short break. 5 minutes goes along very quickly. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce our next writer, Claire Ramsaran, a proud member of the Commonword and Vulnerable Voices writing communities. She has an MA in creative writing, a writer of Indo-Guyanese Irish heritage. She's working on a novel about two Indo-Caribbean brothers who joined other immigrants in the 1950s London in the pursuit of love, of the interracial and queer varieties, and justice. She has worked in human rights education and in various tech roles for the Mayor of London, Ken, not Boris, in Silicon Valley and now in Manchester. Her creative writing has been published in anthologies and journals in Europe and the US. Over to you, Claire.
Okay, thank you very much, Kirit. And just to remind people, our running order for now, it's going to be me, then Jade, then MW Sun, and lastly, but not leastly, Marcia. Okay, so there'll be 4 more readers before we finish up. Okay, so I'm here as a reader, an announcer now, and my piece is called Protest and Survive. I haven't got time to read all of it, so I'm going to read a part of it and then jump to the end. So if you want to read the whole thing, you're going to have to go to the PDF or the playlist. Okay, most teenagers feel like outsiders, and I was no exception. I was the mixed Indo-Guyanese Irish kid in a very white school. And I was not showing any signs of growing out of my tomboy phase. But when I went to Hounslow Borough College at 16, life changed. The other students were a mix of ethnicities and religions. There was no norm. It felt liberating. I found the first of my tribes. We dyed our hair, wore skinny jeans, and created mixtapes for each other. We went to see punky, indie, thrashy guitar bands at the weekend and hung out in record shops in between. You would find us in the local pubs, which were happy to serve 16-year-olds. We were always careful, though, to avoid the National Front pub. I even kissed some boys, but don't worry, it was just a phase. At Hounslow Youth CND, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, I met a gay man and a bisexual woman. He shoplifted, she smoked weed. How much more glamorous could they get? We all walked the 50 miles to Greenham Common, where women, many of them lesbians, had set up a camp to protest this US nuclear missile site. It took us a couple of days to get there, stopping off at a Gurdwara halfway where they fed us and let us sleep on their floor for the night. The next day we reached Greenham Common, and at last I saw my first real live lesbian. I didn't think I was one myself until I met a woman at a Cuba Solidarity group. Remember Solidarity? She flirted with me, so of course I avoided her, but it made me acknowledge my attraction to women. But by the time I headed off to university in Norwich, I was wearing Dr. Martens and sporting an orange Mohican, suddenly more visible than I'd ever been. And then I kissed a girl, and I liked it. While I was coming out, dancing to Bronski Beat and Soft Cell and chasing love affairs in Norwich, I was also out protesting. And believe me, having Margaret bloody Thatcher as Prime Minister gave us plenty to protest about. Cuts to the NHS, the government's support for apartheid in South Africa, closing the coal mines and decimating trade unions, to name but a few. During this time, I progressed from the orange Mohican to a blue flat top, and then to a bright pink one. Apart from my hair, another major event was a new law, Clause 28 of the Local Government Act. It said that a local authority should not promote homosexuality or the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family. Pretended? How dare they? And you know what we said? We said we were never going underground. Soon, 20,000 of us gathered in Manchester, outraged at our rights being eroded in this way. My girlfriend and I, at the time, piled onto a train, the Pink Express. Even the tickets were pink, and we cracked open a bottle of pink carver on our way up to Manchester Piccadilly. Okay, so I am going to jump ahead now to the end. And now, all these years later, the hated Section 28 has been repealed. We have new language, new identities, recognised and hotly debated. We are pansexual and polyamorous and genderqueer drag kings. We are trans and we are non-binary. We are she and he and we are they. We are conventional and middle-aged. We ask whether pride should be a protest or a party, as if we've arrived at equality and all that's left to do is hang out the bunting. But 2020 has seen us locked down in our homes, if we're lucky enough to have them, sheltering from each other and COVID-19. We feel even more indebted to our healthcare workers and key workers and woefully underserved by our politicians. With existing inequalities highlighted and amplified, we learned that those of us in the Black, Asian and minority ethnic populations are more likely to die from this virus. We've seen people fighting for their lives and having to protest once again that Black Lives Matter. At the intersection of the desire to party and the need to protest are many brave individuals asking the questions that we need to address. How, they ask, can we be proud when not all of us are free? Thank you. Okay, so our next reader is Jade. So I'll just read out her bio for you. So Jade Michkora is a writer of British and Zimbabwean heritage based in Yorkshire. She is working on her first novel for young adults and is represented by Abbey Fellows at the Good Literary Agency. She also writes short fiction, creative non-fiction and poetry. She won first prize in Nottingham Writers Studio's George Floyd short story competition. Her work appears in a variety of publications, including 14 poems, Juno Magazine and Untitled Voices. Okay, so over to you, Jade.
Thanks, Claire.
Okay.
My signal is really bad, so if you can't hear me, I guess you just have to boot me off. But I'll give it a go. So this is Vixen. Vixen, noun, a female fox. Informal, a spirited or quarrelsome woman. Exhaustion pierces me to my marrow. Your cry slides into my veins and carries with it an ache that branches out across my body. My wrists feel like they could snap, reminiscent of 10 years ago when they were laden with richer people's plates, transported back and forth from a kitchen to smoke-drowned tables. Except now there's no break, not for months or years, maybe ever. You sustain yourself from my breasts. It's the only way I have to quiet you. You're not content to lay serenely in my arms the way you do for others. When other mothers talk about the eye contact their babies reward them with, I make pleasant affirmative noises, but when I feed you, I watch your face desperately as it stares blankly beyond mine. You're too disgusted with my cowardice to look at me, and this small act of defiance is the only way you have of making known your resentment towards my absence at your birth, after I'd promised to be entirely present. You grow as I shrink. I quench your thirst quicker than I can quench mine. Water poured into my mouth seems to cruelly bypass my throat, as if it's coated with impenetrable sandpaper. I cry out with each latch that looks fine, but invokes an invisible knife to my shoulder blade. Eventually, even sobbing requires too much strength. I'm wilted, deflated, depleted. I don't have flashbacks of your birth because I wasn't there. The images that fill my mind are from before and after, like the arresting lights on the ceiling that flashed across my vision while my paralyzed, useless body was wheeled along a corridor. I see the mountain of my belly spread with brown liquid, while I wondered if I'd see the scalpel slice it open. I see masked faces with dead eyes. Every night I hear, "Your husband won't be able to come into the operating theatre, I'm very sorry." He snores beside me now, proudly martyring himself to diagonal sleep in his noble refusal to abandon us to the spare bedroom. He's oblivious to our nocturnal screams. I need a few minutes, just a few, away from your jarring cry that floods my nervous system with icy terror, just like the alarm that accompanies my memories. I don't know if it's the sound of beeping monitors or the beginnings of your cry from inside me or something else. I'm like a glass held too firmly, squeaking under the pressure, about to shatter into shards that could slice everyone within reach. I need to put you somewhere safe while I have a rest. Through my fatigue, the doorstep seems like a good place. I can put a sturdy door between us then, and it will form a shield to protect you from me. Over the threshold, maybe sound will cease and your anguish will melt away, and I'll get a splash of sleep. Then I'll be able to hold you safely again. It's cold outside, though. One thing I know through all of this confusion is that I'm supposed to keep you warm. I know my skin is best, and tightly tucked blankets are fine, but I'm not sure there'll be enough against the chilly autumn night. The dustbin starts to look like a sturdy outdoor cot. It's the right size, and I can place you gently on its squishy black plastic pillow. This seems as sensible as becoming a mother to find myself, or allowing countless strangers to needlessly put their hand inside my vagina just because they said so. It's as logical as smiling serenely in the face of every misinformation, every patronizing smirk. The lid of the dustbin will act as a canopy to shield you from the salty breeze and hide you from the foxes, hopefully. I wonder if they'd sense the warmth of your soft beating body. They might hear your wail or smell your milky breath or the sweet odour of your nappy. I imagine they're well practiced at knocking off bin lids, These seaside streets are often littered with the discarded remnants of residents' lives, shredded and chewed by foxes' teeth and seagulls' beaks. I picture a vixen discovering you in your alfresco refuge, eyes wide at the delicious bundle. She might carefully take you home and nestle you amongst her warm, soft cubs, and maybe you'd like that. Perhaps she's exhausted and undernourished too, and wants to keep just one thing for herself without thinking of others first. Even as I empathise with the vixen, I know with every enervated fibre of my being that I don't want her to take you any more than I wanted a surgeon to yank you from my womb by your perfect face. You belong to me almost as much as I belong to you. Like the lighthouse on the rocks, the only thing clear through the fog is that keeping you in one happy, healthy peace is my life's purpose. So I'll keep you here against my sore, tired body. Carry on marveling that it grew something so fiercely beautiful, and we'll wait together for this torturous, exquisite time to be over. Thank you for listening. I'm going to introduce the next writer. M.W. Sun was born in Shanghai but grew up in Hong Kong. She is a former news journalist, reporting for the BBC, CNBC, and Radio Television Hong Kong in London, China, and Singapore. She also worked in corporate communications in Hong Kong and New York. Her drama work includes Arachnophobia and From Shore to Shore, which toured 3 times and was adapted for BBC Radio 4 in 2020. Her latest work, The Good Earth, an adaptation for BBC Radio 4, will be broadcast in September 2021. She recently completed Behind the Curtain Door, a commissioned play, and is currently working on a novel.
Hello, everyone. The section that I'm going to read is in the middle of my short story. It's called The Lie. It was a Sunday. My parents had been home for over a month when Mum told me Auntie Rosie was coming from Hong Kong. Please be on your best behavior. You know her Mandy's top of the class again. Auntie Rosie was Mum's older sister. She lived in Hong Kong with her husband, a son and 2 daughters. Mandy was 5 months older than me, and whenever Rosie came to visit, I was reminded Mandy was better than me. She was smarter at school. She was taller and prettier, and she had whiter skin. I had never met Mandy and hoped to keep it that way. But I once saw her in a photograph. About 2 years ago, when Mum and Dad were away, I sneaked into their bedroom looking for I didn't know what exactly. I found a photograph in Dad's bedside table. It was taken in a restaurant. He was there with Rosie, a boy, and 2 girls. One of the girls was much older. The other was my age and must be Mandy. Lizzie and I greeted Auntie Rosie, but she ignored us. Her eyes were fixed on Dad, who was looking out of the window. Mum stood awkwardly by the door. I grabbed Lizzie's hand and we walked out of the room quietly. Why does she hate me? I asked Agam in the kitchen. She doesn't hate you, Agam said. She just ignored me and Lizzie. She didn't even look at us. Agam went on peeling potatoes. Every time she comes, Daddy leaves with her. I sat and watched Agam work. When I went back out, Dad and Auntie Rosie had gone. Mum was in the sitting room gathering up the teacups. The school report was on the side table. On the cover, it said, Mandy Aoyang. So, like me, she was also an Aoyang. I was surprised. It's a rare double-barreled surname. Mum came over and snatched the report from me. Do you know where they've gone? I asked. Mum hesitated. Then she said Dad needed some medicine. What's wrong with Daddy? What has he got? He's been working too hard. All that traveling took its toll on him. The doctor told him to take it easy, Mum said. But he will get better, I insisted. Don't you have exams coming up soon? Shouldn't you be studying? Mum said, waving Mandy's report at me. Auntie Rosie never has to nag Mandy about her studies. Why can't you be more like Mandy? She went on to say she was worried about my future if I carried on like this. Needless to say, I did badly in the year-end exams. The school holidays started and Lizzie and I spent most of the time playing with our friends. Mum was busy looking after Dad. About 2 weeks into the summer break, on a very hot day, Lizzie and I had been playing in the park. On the way home, we went to the corner shop to get red bean ice lollies. When we got back, Auntie Rosie was in the sitting room with a young man. I recognized him. He's the teenager in Dad's photograph. Lizzie and I greeted her, but she said nothing, while the young man stared at me. I thought he must be Rosie's son, and wondered if I should greet him, say something like, "Hello, cousin," when I noticed they were looking angrily at me, their eyebrows knitted together. Just as I remembered how much she hated me, something icy and wet gripped my hand. I looked down, the half-eaten ice lolly had melted, and the little red beans were swimming in the melted ice on the parquet floor. I escaped to the kitchen and washed my hands. Then I heard footsteps coming down and a suitcase being dragged down the stairs. Agam rushed out to help with the suitcase. I followed and saw Daddy walking out of the house with Rosie and the young man. Rosie was holding his arm on one side and the young man holding his other arm. Lizzie and I stood by Mum and watched as they got into the car. Nobody spoke. Then the car drove away. And now I'd like to introduce our next reader, Marcia Hutchinson. Marcia was the first from her family to go to university and first from school to attend Oxford University. She ran publishing company Primary Colours from 1997 to 2014 and was awarded an MBE for services to cultural diversity in 2010. She has written for The Guardian, Yorkshire Post, and other publications. She started Migrants Union in response to the Windrush crisis. Windrush Witness, an oral history, is the first project. She writes short stories, poems, and is working on a memoir and her first novel. She was elected as a Labour councillor in May 2021. So let's welcome Marcia.
Thank you so much, Mimi. Delighted to be here. I'm reading a poem tonight. Most of my writing is short stories and prose, but every now and then I do write a poem, and I hope that mothers will see some resonance in this one. So the poem is called Mother Me. Slinging words as swords at me, mad at mother's muddled meanings, asking for abject apology. I do not have the heart. What you want is wisdom wrought from a life longed for and loved, that did not exist except in expectation. Holding your hurt heart in my hands, alas, antipathy ascends to animosity. Darling daughter's demon dance, listening for a lull in lashing language. Falsehoods flung full in my face. until a temper tantrum tears the telephone from my earnest electronic ear. To break beyond brain and breath, sentiments simply searching for solace, patiently pushing parent past pride, gladly goading from the gut, meaning to manipulate, roaring resentments wrestled from my womb, noting nothing, neither's needs named. Gone is gratitude or grace. Feeling for you through the fog of fear. We cannot consciously communicate. I reach for written worth. Mother me. Mother me. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia, and thank you, everybody. I think we need to give, a Zoom or whatever sort of, thanks to all our incredibly talented writers. So I just want to say, I don't want to lose anybody's name, so I'm just going to make sure. I just want to thank again Abe, Jay, Rana, Kirit, Claire, Jade, Mimi, and Marcia for a really wonderful night. Incredibly high standard of writing. I have to say I wasn't that good when I was in Identity. So it's really something to hear you all. And as Radhika, who is our digital marketing officer, has just dropped into the chat, if you've enjoyed this evening, why not share the YouTube stream with your friends? And she's put the link in there again. Also, where can we buy the book? Carrie Jade Williams asked. I just want to give a shout out as well to Paulina Maboye, who's been, encouraging everybody as you're going along. That is definitely my era identity. And thank you so much, Pauline. And Beverly Thomas is another writer I know, talented person. Thank you to everybody who's come in the audience and for supporting our writers and being here. Please do share the link. The book, if you find out more about Identity and read the collection, she's just dropped that in there as well. That's www.cultureword.org.uk/identity-2. But it's easier if you can see the actual link is better than trying to get it. There's someone, Jay has also dropped, please check out Greater Manchester Words of Hope, his Facebook page. If any of the other writers want to share something at the last minute about where else to find your writing, Jade put her Instagram and her Twitter in there. To answer Carrie's question about where can you buy the book, right now, Loose Connections is free as an audio collection. And I think that Radhika is going to put a link to where you can find that. It's on SoundCloud, isn't it, Claire? So there you'll get, it's on SoundCloud. It's called Loose Connections if you Google on SoundCloud and look for it. But hopefully Radhika will also put that link into the chat before we're finished. And if you want to know how to join the collection, there it is. So Radhika has just put that into the chat, soundcloud.com/commonword-cultureword/stats/loose connections. But it's much easier if you can actually get that from the chat. I think that Radhika is also going to put in, Abe just put in her links, and Radhika is going to drop some links about how to join Identity. So if you want to join Identity, I think that we're going to share the webpage. If you go to the webpage, which is on cultureword.org, that would be www.cultureword.org.uk. And if you go there and look for workshops, you'll find identity. But hopefully, if you want to join our Identity Writers Group, we've just put the Facebook link in there as well. So I think that might be, unless anyone else wants to put a link in there. If you want to save the chat, I know some people are new to Zoom. If you look, if you have the chat open, if you see at the bottom of your screen, if you can, there should be like a little speech bubble that says chat. And then if you click on that, the chat will open on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you go to the bottom, there's something that says file, and then there's 3 dots, and you can save the chat. And if you click the 3 dots, save the chat, and you need to click show in folder, and that, which I've just done, and that will click and save everything in the chat for you. And so I don't know what else to say other than it's been a great evening. So happy to see identity growing and changing. It was almost all spoken word in my day, and now it's, you know, it's flowered out to so many different forms. We're not only spoken word artists, we can write anything, young adult, novels, memoirs, whatever. And you got to hear a little bit of that tonight. So if you're interested in joining, please do come along. And, you know, Commonword's website is also in the chat. Click save chat, say you'll get all of those, links. And that's it, folks. Great evening. You know, thank you once again to wonderful, wonderful identity. Thank you, Claire, for getting everybody together. Thank you, everybody, for coming out when the sun was actually out. And instead of running around the park, you were here with us. We really appreciate it. And please do spread the word and spread that link. And